Hello there, my lovelies. How's it going? Welcome back. My name is Boomy and you're watching my channel, Boomy Reactions. Right, guys, we have another fat electrician video to watch along today. So Nick is going to be regaling us with another tale of a historic hero. I haven't sold that very well, have I? Right, okay, so this video comes as a request from one of my patrons. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you for your support and thank you very much for requesting this video. So check this one out. This is John Paul Jones. Okay, so the father of America's Navy. I don't really need to say anymore, do I, guys? So it's another name that I haven't heard of before, which again, I know I say every video, but it is an absolute shame. It's almost criminal that we're not taught more about these not unknown historical figures, but I feel like it's, for whatever reason, it's like a part of history that kind of, you know, the textbooks missed out, or they didn't make enough of a song and dance over. They didn't mention these heroes. And then I know there's a handful of reasons why, you know, certain names are omitted out of these textbooks, or they choose to credit other people with their feats. But, you know, there's probably a handful of reasons that go hand in hand with these stories. So yes, this is another new face for me, another completely new figure. So I also don't pretend to be very knowledgeable on all things Navy, military based. So forgive me if I come out with some daft questions, guys. And you know what I'm like. I normally have about 50 questions every video, every episode. So let's check this one out, shall we, guys? And as ever, don't forget to like and subscribe, my lovelies. Thank you so much. If you're interested, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account, and that link is over there. And if you would like to help support this channel any further, I have a Patreon account, and if you fancy checking that out at all, that link is in the description below.
Behind every big movement in history, there's a hero, and that hero seemingly gets all of the credit. But behind that hero are other men that were deemed too rough around the edges to get any of the fame.
Absolutely. So Nick has hit the nail on the head. I'm sure there are, like I said, there's a handful of reasons why the history books do tend to miss out mentioning certain individuals. Like, what's that saying from the film Braveheart? It's very true, isn't it? History is written by the people who hang heroes. So yes, there's always, not an agenda, but there's always a side of the story that they want to push for an agenda. There's a side that they don't want people learning about. Always the case. I know. History can be quite biased. So, nail on the head, Nick. Absolutely. Too rough around the edges, he said this time. So behind every historic figure, every historic hero, there's normally someone who is much more prepared to get their hands dirty and do the fighting, do the hard work, and they're normally not as credited as, you know, the history figures that we hear of so often throughout history.
For every George Washington, there's a Daniel Morgan. For every Abraham Lincoln, there's a Cassius Clay.
Yes.
For every Omar Bradley, there's a terrible Terry Allen. And for the United States Navy, there's this man. Today we're talking about John Paul Jones, the father of the United States Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty well understood that America won the Revolutionary War by utilizing guerrilla warfare tactics. What's less understood is that while American Revolutionary War heroes like Daniel Morgan, Andrew Pickens, and Francis Marion were conducting guerrilla warfare in the United States, John Paul Jones was utilizing guerrilla warfare tactics on the water and taking that fight all the way to the British, becoming the first man to attack Great Britain on their own turf in over 100 years. He was the first man to raise an American flag on the first ever U.S. Navy commissioned warship, the USS Alfred. He was there and he participated when the United States Marine Corps made its first amphibious landing in history. He was the first American to ever capture a British warship, and to the best of my knowledge, he was the last American Revolutionary War hero to be brought back home and laid to rest. And we're going to get to it right after a word from our sponsor.
So, is this literally the case of this guy? You know, he's not as polished as the, you know, the other historical figures that we want to publish in the textbooks. We want everyone to hear about, and we want to really, you know, make a public stunt out of this. Is that literally the only reason why? Maybe they've got a bit of a sketchy record in the past, and then they feel like people would be a bit judgmental. I don't know. Like I said, a handful of reasons, isn't there? John Paul Jones.
Our story begins in 1747 when a young John Paul is born. Note, it is just John Paul, not John Paul Jones.
A does sound, I don't know why, the name John Paul always makes me feel like it sounds very French. I know this isn't French at all. No, I'm thinking of Jean Paul, isn't it? It's not John Paul. Jean Paul. And of course, the name Jones is very not French. I always thought it was very Welsh.
Yet. He was born in Kirkby in Scotland on the prestigious Abergland estate where his father was the head gardener. And this is also where he grew up because he lived on the estate because his father was the head gardener, and this gave him a different childhood than many other people. It's this weird dichotomy that John Paul and his family are lower servant class people, but because they live on the estate, they're surrounded by the wealthy aristocrats all day, every day, 24/7. So John Paul is well educated from a young age. He can read, he can write, he's articulate, he knows how to walk, talk, act, dress the part of an aristocrat, but no matter what, at the end of the day, he's just the gardener's son.
You want I should treat him like white folks?
No. What's the name of that Pecklewood boy from town that works with the glass?
Oh, you mean Jerry?
That's the boy's name, Jerry. You just treat him like you would Jerry.
John sees and feels this treatment his entire childhood, and it doesn't take long for him to catch on that he's never not going to be the gardener's son. So he has to come up with a way to change his stars, so to speak. And the easiest way to go about that is for him to pursue a career in the Navy and become a captain of a ship. And captains back then, referred to as masters, are almost always part of the aristocratic, wealthy society. So that's what he wants to do. He becomes an apprentice on a merchant marine vessel at the age of 13 years old. For the next 4 years, between the ages of 13 and 17, he apprentices on a ship called the Friendship, learning anything and everything he can about how to be a good sailor. Then after 4
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Nick. That is the cutest name for a ship. The Friendship. Oh my gosh. Oh.
4 years, the Friendship ends up getting sold, and 17-year-old John Paul is out of a job and unemployed. So he takes the first job that he can get, which unfortunately is working on a slave ship in the transatlantic slave trade. He does that for several years, and he hates it the entire time. He finds the slave trade to be absolutely disgusting, later in his own writings describing it as an abominable trade. Which, while obviously true, it's also worth mentioning that these were pretty progressive views to have in the 1700s.
Oh my gosh, weren't they? I was just gonna think, yeah, obviously we all share that attitude. But for, you know, a white person to have that attitude towards it so many hundred years ago, when it was, I don't know, generally perceived as, you know, something that people are, you know, it's that they think it's useful or whatever. So yeah, that is quite progressive.
Especially for a simple gardener's son. Regardless, John Paul had those opinions, and for that reason, he quits. And when he quit at port in Jamaica. He was halfway through a two-way trip, and he just quit there. He couldn't do it anymore. So now he's basically stranded in Jamaica, so he hangs around the ports looking for a new job that isn't in the slave trade. He ends up meeting Samuel McAdams, the captain of the brig John, who offers him a ride back to Britain if he's willing to work on the trip, to which he immediately agrees. So they set sail, they start making their way back to Britain, and then along the way, Captain McAdams ends up getting yellow fever and dies, which is, you know, horrible, but also at the end of the day, as far as the crew's concerned, not that big of a deal. We have a first mate. There's a chain of command for a reason. The first mate takes over. A couple weeks later, the first mate gets yellow fever and he dies too. Now, that sucks also. However, there's probably a third guy in the chain of command that's now going to take over.
Did he get yellow fever?
But there isn't. You see, at this point in time, being able to navigate on the ocean was kind of like protected tradecraft. They didn't want everybody on a ship knowing how to navigate the ocean. So
I imagine they gate-kept. That was very gatekeep. My gosh, what is the past tense? It was gate-kept. Let's just say that.
Oh, usually it was just the captain and the first mate that actually knew how to do it, and everybody else was just kind of following orders. So now the two dudes that had the skill to navigate their way back home are both dead, and nobody knows what the fuck they're doing, and they're basically stranded out at sea. But luckily, the 20-year-old kid they picked up in Jamaica had been studying to be the best sailor that he could for the past 7 years, and he actually knew how to navigate the ocean. He takes command of the ship, brings it all the way back to Britain, no problem. The owner of the brig John finds out what happened. He hears about this 20-year-old hotshot they picked up in Jamaica that was able to navigate his ship from being lost at sea, and he figures, fuck it, I'm just gonna make this kid the captain, and that's exactly what he does. John Paul is now master of the ship. He has changed his stars. He should be in the aristocratic class now. But the brig John is a really small ship. He needs to keep working as a captain and work his way up so he's a captain of a much larger vessel, and that'll cement his role as a gentleman.
A gentleman.
So that's what he does. For the next 3 years, he just continues being the captain of the Brig John, making voyages across the Atlantic and back. And it's kind of a struggle the entire time because a lot of the men under his command are older, more experienced sailors, and they don't think they should have to be taking orders from some 20 to 23-year-old kid that was the son of a gardener. Despite that difficulty, it never really becomes a huge issue until 1770, when one of his crew members by the name of Mungo Maxwell decided that he's from a wealthy Scottish family and there's no way in hell he's taking orders from the son of a gardener that's younger than him.
So I was going to say, okay, I can maybe understand the attitude of, I have years experience. Why would I listen? Why would I take commands from someone who is half my age, clearly very green, also not really, but his age, I can understand it to some extent, but that whole attitude of, oh, please, he's the son of a gardener. Ugh.
Gross. To get some of the crew to join with him to stir up a mutiny. They're going to throw John Paul overboard. He's going to take over the ship. John Paul finds out about this. He orders him to be flogged with 12 lashes from the cat of nine tails, which seems extreme, but at this point in time, it was completely standard practice. Mungo Maxwell learned his lesson. Brutal. He just sits down and shuts the fuck up for the rest of the trip. They make their way over to the West Indies. They port. He says, fuck you, I quit. He leaves. John Paul's like, okay, whatever. Drops off his cargo, picks up his other batch of cargo. He heads back to Britain. Upon making port back in Britain, John Paul is immediately placed in shackles and arrested and put on trial for the murder of Mungo Maxwell. Apparently, after leaving John Paul's ship, he found another ship that took off sooner than John Paul did, headed back to Britain, and on that ship, he got yellow fever and he died along the voyage, and now his wealthy Scottish family is claiming that John Paul murdered him.
But use your common sense, guys. How is that? That's nothing to do with John Paul. That's not his fault. You know, literally planning a mutiny. What is he supposed to do? What would be expected of him? I think I know it's a very, very harsh punishment, but you know, again, because his age is maybe going to work against him with an awful lot of the crew, has to rule with an iron fist to gain respect from them. You know, it's brutal, it's harsh, but what would any other captain have done given the circumstances? That should have been like the main source, that kind of, you know, that main defense there. You know, what would any other captain of a ship have done under those circumstances? Absolutely. He chose to leave the ship. You know, what more can I can't see how anyone could point the finger at John Paul for this.
John Paul has to post bail, get permission from the court to travel back to the West Indies, get documentation from the port authorities saying that Mungo Maxwell was there, he was alive, and John Paul didn't kill him. He gets that documentation, then he has to find out the other ship that he took back to Britain, track down that captain, and get documents from that captain saying, yeah, he was on my ship, he got yellow fever, he died. He gets all those documentations, goes back to the court. His name is legally cleared, but this whole process takes like 6 months, and his name is getting drugged through the mud in the court of public opinion the entire time. So while he's legally not a murderous captain, a lot of people don't know that. So that sucks, but there's nothing he can do, so he just keeps doing his job. And then 2 years later, he is given a promotion. He's given the command of a much larger cargo ship called the Betsy. And the Betsy is a humongous cargo ship. It's one of the biggest ones that Britain has. So at this point, he should definitely be in that wealthy aristocratic class. He should be a gentleman, and he starts going to the dinner parties, you know, with the powdered wigs and all the bullshit. He's allowed to be there, but at the end of the day, he can still feel that everybody's looking down on him because no matter what he does, he's still the son of a gardener. And
I hate this. I think it's disgusting, and you know, it still happens to some extent, doesn't it, guys? It's very judgmental, but oh gosh, I can imagine hundreds of years ago it was just rife, just disgusting mentality.
At this point, he's starting to think to himself in the back of his head, like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to make a bunch of money, and then I'm going to move over to the United States. I'm going to live in Virginia with my brother who's been living there for years as a tailor, and I'm just going to retire in the United States in the new world where there's a new opportunity. There's not hundreds of years of, you know, I'm from this family or that family. Everything's new. That's going to be my new start. But before he can do that, he's got to earn enough money so that he can show up to the United States as a rich man. So he keeps working. And then in 1773, shit hits the fan. On one of his voyages, his ship gets damaged in a storm and he has to make an unplanned port in Ireland, stop, have the ship repaired. Then once the ship is repaired, he gets sick for like 3 weeks. And while that's going on, a lot of the cargo ends up getting spoiled. So by the time he makes it to the port that he was originally supposed to be at, he doesn't have all the cargo to sell. He sells what cargo's still good, makes enough money to pick up his next load of cargo, and he heads back to the UK. The problem is he now doesn't have enough money to pay all the sailors under his command while they're at sea, which wouldn't seem like a big deal. It's not like you can fucking do anything with the money while you're out in the middle of the ocean, but apparently some people got really upset about it. One of his sailors got drunk and decided to attack him with a club, and when he came at John with the club, John drew his sword and stabbed the man straight through the chest, killing him almost immediately. Now, that's a clear-cut case of self-defense. However, John realizes that a lot of his men are pissed off they haven't been paid. A lot of men are friends with that guy. He's dead. He's worried that his crew isn't going to stick up for him, and on top of that, he still has the reputation as a murderous captain, even though that was complete bullshit.
Oh gosh. And so understandably, you'd be worried that half of these crew, they've got reason to be disgruntled, to not be very happy with you. Are they going to go to the lengths of lying under oath in court? Are they going to say it wasn't a case of self-defense? He attacked him.
Time to go. So John, fearing he's not going to get a fair trial, flees to America and starts living in Virginia with his brother, the Tailor. Now, this is late 1773. He's now stuck in Virginia. He's basically lost his career as a ship captain. He adopts the last name Jones, becomes John Paul Jones, attempting to not be found. He doesn't really know what to do with himself. Presumably, he's depressed. He just kind of hangs out at his brother's house all day. He's reading, doing philosophy, poetry, just trying to take his mind off the fact that his entire life plan has just been completely derailed. Then in 1775, the American Revolution kicks off, and holy shit, this is his chance. He can go serve in the United States Navy and make something of himself. So he immediately heads off to Philadelphia and volunteers to join the United States Navy, which at this point doesn't even exist yet. And at this point, not a lot of experienced men were going to volunteer to join the United States Navy because the Continental Congress was issuing letters of marque or marquee. A letter of marque was basically a permission slip from the Continental Congress, the government of the United States, to go out and be a pirate. If you were some random dude and you had a boat with guns on it and you wanted to take that boat and go rob the British, you were absolutely welcome to do so. Bring your loot back to America and you could keep it. Which meant that pretty much all the experienced sailors in America were given those two options. You could join the United States Navy, be treated like a peon and get a small amount of money for your service, or you could go be a state-sanctioned pirate and maybe win the lottery. Who knows? Most people are taking that second option, but not John Paul Jones. So John Paul Jones gets commissioned as a lieutenant right out of the gate, and he is serving under Captain Essex Hopkins, the man that's in charge of the entire United States Navy at this point, aboard the USS Alfred, the United States Navy's first ever commissioned warship. And while serving there, John Paul Jones is the first man to ever raise the Grand Union flag aboard the USS Alfred. If you don't know, the Grand Union flag is essentially, in my opinion, the first American flag. It still has the British flag in the upper left-hand corner, where today we have 50 stars, but it has the stripes for the 13 colonies. And the message was clear. This was 1775. America hadn't declared its independence yet, but there was a rebellion going on. So the meaning behind that flag was, hey, we're united, we're armed, we're ready to fight, but we're still willing to reconcile if you agree to start treating us appropriately. And that's why they left the British flag in the upper corner.
Absolutely. That given the time, given the choices, that's a very tactful thing to do, because it's taking the stand. You know, it's like Nick said, we're united, but we're not gonna put up with it. However, we're willing to negotiate. Come on, meet us halfway. We're not in an outright rebellion yet.
That didn't last for very long. While serving as lieutenant on the USS Alfred, John Paul Jones is having his crew drill over and over and over again how to fire the cannons. He wants to get them to the point that they can fire this cannon once every 15 seconds because he knows that's why the British Navy is so good. They drill their battle drills over and over and over again like a well-oiled machine. The problem is the United States Navy has no funding. The British have cut off the supply of all of the gunpowder, all of the cannons, all the cannonballs, all the supplies. So they're just drilling it dry dry, going through the motions over and over and over again. Which also highlights the problem. We need guns, we need gunpowder, we have to get supplies. So in March of 1776, the United States Navy, under the command of Essex Hopkins, decides that they are going to, for the first time in U.S. Navy history, project power. They are going to go out on the offensive and attack New Providence, the capital of the Bahamas. And that's because it is a major British military outpost with a ton of military supplies, cannons, gunpowder, guns, uniforms, everything. They're going to go in there, take it over, and steal all those supplies so they can continue fighting this war. So they're getting ready to take off, and 234 seemingly random dudes show up with guns. These guys are like, some of them are wearing civilian clothing with like hunting coats. Some of them are wearing blue coats. Some of them have green coats. It's just this ragtag crew of dudes with guns, and they are under the command of Captain Samuel Nicholas. And these are America's first Marines, literally men recruited out of a bar, Tun Tavern, a few months prior, and they're coming too. The Marine Corps just got founded. They don't even have official uniforms yet, but they're already showing up to fight.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. I'm all out of bubblegum.
So they make their way down to the Bahamas, and once they get to the port where the actual military base is, it becomes very obvious that the British know that they're there, they know why they're coming, and they're ready to defend it. Commander Hopkins is about to just sail directly into the port, into all the gunfire, and just slug it out. At which point, John Paul Jones goes, or, hear me out, we've got 234 Marines in the back of the ships. Why don't we just sail around, not go through all the gunfire, land on an unoccupied beach, let the Marines get out and go take everything over? Essex Hopkins agrees, and that's exactly what happens. 234 Marines and 50 sailors make their amphibious landing on the beach. They then immediately go, they capture the city of Nassau and the British Fort Montague, all in one fell swoop. They captured 88 cannons, 15 mortars, 68 barrels of gunpowder, a bunch of guns, a bunch of other military supplies, and they took the British governor, Montfort Brown, as their prisoner. And Montfort Brown would later complain that the Marines and the Navy men drank all of his booze out of the governor's palace.
He's going to say tea. You wouldn't believe it. Yes, I know they took me captive, but they drank all my tea. Didn't get a single cup.
Officially cementing the American military tradition of win, get hammered, repeat. From here, they make their way back to America. John Paul Jones is promoted to captain, and he is given control of the USS Providence, a 12-gun sloop. The only problem is the British Navy has put up a blockade, essentially trying to force the American ships to stay inside the harbor. That way, we can't interrupt their supply lines. John Paul Jones doesn't really give a fuck. He waits for one night when it's dark, it's foggy, slips through the blockade, and then just starts fucking shit up with what amounts to guerrilla warfare tactics on the water. John Paul Jones and the crew of the Providence proceed to go out and start capturing British merchant vessels left and right. They have multiple run-ins with British warships that try to stop him, but they're never able to quite pull it off. The HMS Solo Bay gets clever, and they try to raise the Grand Union flag, signaling to John Paul Jones that they're actually an ally, at which point John Paul's not buying it, but he pretends like he does. So he lowers his sails, basically sending the signal like, go ahead and approach and we'll have a conversation. Yeah. And as the ship gets close, they veer off, and they're actually trying to set up a full broadside run. But at the perfect moment, he raises the sails and speeds away, and now they're headed the opposite direction, and they're not going to be able to get turned back around in time to catch him.
Thank you, Commodore, for getting us ready to make way.
On another occasion,
got so many Pirates of the Caribbean references going on here.
The HMS Millstone chases him for 8 hours straight, shooting cannons at him the entire time, and they miss every single one of them. And on the 8th hour, right as it becomes apparent they're not going to be able to catch him and he is going to get away, he orders one of his Marines to fire a single musket shot to compliment the captain of the HMS Milestone on his beautiful marksmanship. They then proceed to go and capture even more British merchant vessels. They capture 16 in total. Then John Paul Jones realizes that the British military is eating an awful lot of fish for food, and all that fish is coming from a bunch of fishing villages in Nova Scotia, and he's about to put an end to that shit. So the USS Providence rolls up, sinks the first ship, sinks the second ship. The third ship is looking pretty awesome, so they decide they're gonna go ahead, board it. They get on board. They don't like it, so they light it on fire, get back on the USS Providence, and then destroy 12 more ships. Then they commandeer 5 of them and sail them back to America.
Look at me, sure.
I'm the captain now.
At this point, Congress is like, holy shit, John Paul Jones is putting in fucking work. So they give him the USS Alfred. That's going to be his flagship. Now he's got his own little fleet because he's still going to maintain control of the USS Providence, and he's also picking up the USS Hampden. He immediately takes a small fleet back up to Nova Scotia, captures 5 more ships, burns another one down, raids the entire coastline, and burns down an entire warehouse full of whale oil. Okay, that's great for the war effort, but now John Paul Jones has a huge problem on his hands because the American Navy's having a big issue with recruiting because everybody's opting to go where all the money is, and that's in privateering under a letter of marque. So he was shorthanded when he left America, and now that he just picked up 5 more ships, he's absolutely shorthanded. So he ends up recruiting people from Nova Scotia to operate some of these ships for him. That's fine. Next mission, he receives word he needs to go to a coal mine in Nova Scotia, sail up there. There's a bunch of American prisoners being held there by the British military. He needs to launch a raid and free them. On the way there, they run across a massive British transport ship called the Malesh. So he pulls right up with his Marines, boards the ship, takes it over. On board, there is 10,000 winter uniforms for the British, commandeers the entire vessel, continues towards the objective. By this point, the USS Providence is in rough shape, and so is its crew. Everybody's overworked. The Providence is leaking. They want to turn back, but John Paul Jones is like, no, we got to keep moving forward. Just keep it together. We're going to get through this. He gives a speech. He feels like he improved morale. Apparently he didn't, because the USS Providence basically has mutiny. They turn the ship around in the middle of the night and they flee. That sucks, but he still has the Alfred, still has the Hampden, and he's got all the other fishing vessels and that transport that he captured. He continues on his way to Sydney, Nova Scotia to free these prisoners. He gets to Sydney, Nova Scotia, finds out the prisoners have actually switched sides and they're now working for the British, very similar to how the Nova Scotia people are now working for him on all his captured vessels. So just part of the game. The problem now is that his little fleet has been caught up to and is being chased by the HMS Solo Bay and the HMS Wilford too.
I suppose what goes through the minds of these people in Nova Scotia is very much survival, isn't it? It's desperate times. You're going to do what's in your own best interest. And, you know, if a better offer comes along first, you're going to take it, aren't you?
2 fairly large British warships, and he does not want to get in a gunfight with these guys. So that night, John Paul Jones has a genius plan. Okay, he's got all these captured ships, and he has his 2 American naval vessels. So what he decides to do is he tells one of his captured ships, loads it up entirely with the Nova Scotians that are working for him, because he knows that they're not going to be held liable when they get captured, right? All they're going to have to do if the British capture him is be like, look, we were his prisoners, we had to follow orders or he was going to kill us, so they're going to get away scot-free. What he has them do is he has them hang a lantern up on their ship and sail a different direction while his other ships kill all light and continue sailing back towards Boston. The British warships take the bait, they chase down this fishing vessel all night, and by the time the sun is up and they realize what happened, John Paul Jones and his little fleet are long gone. So John Paul Jones makes it back to America, and technically the mission may be considered a failure because he didn't rescue the 300 prisoners, but there weren't actually 300 prisoners to rescue because they had switched sides. He captured all these naval vessels, and more importantly, he captured those 10,000 winter uniforms, which had a humongous impact on all of America. Those 10,000 winter uniforms were then worn by the American forces at Valley Forge during winter and kept them from freezing to death. And they are the exact same uniforms that Americans wore when they crossed the Delaware River on Christmas. Now at this point, John Paul Jones is kicking ass, right? He's doing more for the war effort on the naval front than literally anyone else in the entire US Navy. And in his mind, he's thinking, they're gonna make me the first admiral in American history. This is gonna be fucking awesome. He gets back to Boston. He finds out not only is he not gonna be made an admiral, he's actually getting demoted. Apparently in John Paul Jones' absence, AKA while he was out winning a war, the government decided that they should have a comprehensive list of their naval officers and how important they are and base rank off of that. And for some reason, John Paul Jones is ranked 18th. And every single man ranked higher than him on this list is,
let me guess, from a wealthy family. Is that going to be the next sentence out of Nick's mouth?
ranked that high because they're either friends with somebody or they're somebody's kid. Basically, it's the same bullshit the British were doing with their aristocracy. They're rewarding connections and not ability and merit and getting the fucking job done. So John Paul Jones is absolutely pissed. They take away his fleet, they take away the USS Alfred, and they give him a smaller sloop called the USS Ranger and give him orders to sail to France, where he is going to meet up with Benjamin Franklin, where he is supposedly going to pick up a new frigate, an actual warship with a ton of guns. So there's a little bit of a silver lining. He makes his way over to France.
Blend in.
So he sails across the Atlantic, he's about to France, and then one of his spotters sees 17 sails off in the distance, and he's thinking, surely, this is a British supply convoy, we're gonna fuck all them up, then we'll go to France. And the crew is actually pumped about this, because by this point in the war, the United States government had decided that whenever a US Navy ship captures a British ship, the crew would get a portion of the money that they captured, and this was gonna help them with naval recruiting, so not everybody wanted to go be a privateer and do a bunch of pirate shit. So the crew's pumped, they're ecstatic. They're chasing down this supply convoy. They're all going to make a bunch of money. It's going to be awesome. They get up on this supply convoy and they have the oh shit moment because yeah, it's a big British supply convoy, but it's being escorted by the HMS Invincible, a massive British warship with 74 fucking cannons on it.
We're all gonna die together out here. You're a good group of boys to die with, I'll tell you that much.
Now they're kind of screwed because they approach the convoy from the rear. So if they peel off and turn around, the HMS Invincible is probably going to see them and they're going to chase them down and they're absolutely going to sink them. So John Paul Jones, master of fuckery, immediately pulls down anything that would signify that they're Americans and just pulls in with the rest of the convoy and pretends to be a British merchant ship all day long until nightfall. And then under the cover of dark, he turns the ship around and goes straight to France. They make a clean getaway. Nobody knew they were even there. So
Puts on his best, thickest British accent. Hello, Governor. Good day.
the USS Ranger and John Paul Jones make it into France on December 2nd, 1977, and pretty much as soon as they get there, he finds out that the French gave away the frigate to somebody else.
You what?
What?
Perfect, great. Sailed across the Atlantic Ocean for literally nothing. This is fantastic. So he ends
They're just giving it away. No alliances, no allegiance. Just give it away. Oh.
up linking up with Benjamin Franklin. They end up becoming buddies. He's hanging out with all the aristocrats in France, rubbing elbows, and eventually he realizes he's not going to get the ship he wants, so he's like, fuck it, why don't you guys just cut me loose and let me go do my thing? And that's exactly what he gets. The orders he receives are, and I quote, distress the enemy. And that's exactly what he do. Britain is already writing newspaper articles about John Paul Jones basically being a pirate after raiding Nova Scotia. They want to see a pirate. He's going to show them what a pirate does. He absolutely covers the deck of the USS Ranger in swivel guns. He gets his hands on every musket and blunderbuss he can find, loads up on Marines and sailors, and sets off towards Whitehaven. Whitehaven is a major port that he's familiar with that's going to have hundreds of ships in its harbor, a major coal outpost, and he is going to go there and try to burn down every ship in the harbor. He is going to be the first man to attack Britain on its own home turf in over 100 years. And that stat's cool to say and all, but you need to appreciate the real strategic genius of what he's actually about to go do.
Are we, when he says that in the last 100 years, is that, am I thinking of the Spanish Armada? Is that the last time previously before that? So it was Spain attacking Britain within British waters, territories. Yeah, just over like 150 years prior to that? No. I can't do the math. Let's carry on.
Hacking Great Britain on its own home turf in 100 years. Nobody is alive today in Great Britain at this point in time that has ever seen Britain be attacked. Ever. So if he can pull this off, it's going to be absolutely huge. It's going to freak out the British population, and it's going to send the message to the British like, hey, you guys are busy projecting your power all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. You're taking your massive navy and you're sending them over to America to mess with us. And if you do that, we're going to send people to mess with you. And that's going to force the British Navy to pull back a significant amount of their ships just to patrol their own borders. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, let me put this into like modern context. Imagine if during the global war on terror, ISIS or Al-Qaeda somehow got their hands on a battleship and invaded Miami, okay? It'd be fucking freaky. So the USS Ranger sets off towards Whitehaven. As they're leaving the harbor in France, they fire their cannons, saluting one of the French naval vessels as they pass by, and that French naval vessel returns the salute, okay? This is a humongous deal. It's the first time it ever happened in US naval history. Firing the cannons back in salute meant that you recognize this nation as its own sovereign entity and you recognize their authority, and this was the first time in American history that it ever happened. So the USS...
Well, to be fair, me and Britain and France, especially at that point in time, you know, it's a very love-hate relationship. Sometimes we're besties, sometimes we're not. A bit of a back and forth. So that is a massive deal though, isn't it? Like Nick said, it's recognising the sovereignty of the newly formed American nation. Okay.
Rangers headed towards Whitehaven, and John Paul Jones' lieutenant lets him know, like, hey, there's some of the members in the crew that want to have a mutiny. They think this is a crazy plan, and they kind of want to throw John Paul Jones in shackles and sail back to America. Luckily, not all the crew is against John Paul Jones on this, especially the Marines who are there to keep order, and they've had his back the entire time. They kind of tamp down the mutiny and continue towards Whitehaven to go on this mission. So they arrive there on April 23rd, 1778. In early morning hours, he has to make a decision how he's going to go about this. And what he figures is he can't take the whole crew out because half the crew's mutinous. So he's going to end up leaving the Marines with the ship because he doesn't want to leave the mutinous crew there. He doesn't want to take them with him because he doesn't trust them. He doesn't want to leave them there alone because they might steal the ship and leave him stranded. So the Marines are going to stay there with the mutinous crew, hold them on the ship, make sure they don't leave John Paul Jones and the men that he has loyal to him. So he's
I love that word, mutinous. Mutinous.
going to go out in rowboats in 2 groups of 15. You got John Paul in one group, and then you got 15 sailors in the other. John Paul Jones is going to take his men. They're going to scale the walls of the fort. They're going to sneak in, kill the guards if they have to, and then they're going to take nails and they're going to hammer them into the ignition holes of the cannon, rendering the cannons absolutely useless so that they don't get shot at. And while that's going on, the other crew is going to go out to the harbor with lanterns and burn every ship to the ground. So John Paul Jones and his crew go, they scale the walls to the fort. The guards are asleep. He's trying to be quiet, doesn't kill them, doesn't fire a shot, trying to be stealthy, goes in, renders all the cannons completely useless. So at this point, John Paul Jones is thinking, okay, good, that's taken care of. Now he's going to go out in the harbor and help the rest of his men burn 100 ships down. He looks out into the harbor. There is a distinct lack of shit on fire. So he goes out there, he's looking for his men. He's like, what the fuck is going on? And then he starts hearing alarms going off. The people in the town are waking up. They realize they're being invaded and they're setting off alarms. He finally finds his other group of men and half of them are drunk. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? It's raining. The lanterns couldn't light very well. They were trying to light ships on fire. They got one ship to actually start burning. It didn't even burn down all the way because everything's raining and wet and they couldn't get a fire started. So apparently the other group of sailors said, fuck it. We're going to go break into a bar and drink all their booze.
This is quite possibly the most British thing I've ever heard from a crew. I mean, you're in Britain. You've got to anticipate it's going to rain. It rains like 95% of the time here. And we like booze. Sad but true. You know, it's going to happen, isn't it? I feel like this was a bit of an oversight. Definitely could have been predicted, this bit.
And that is what alerted the people in the town, and they're now setting off the alarms. So John Paul Jones is like, fuck it, now we have to leave. So they go, they board the USS Ranger, and they take off. So they make their clean getaway. At this point, John Paul Jones is like, all right, not exactly what I have in mind, but we're doing pirate shit. What should we do next? We're in Whitehaven. That's really close to St. Mary's Isle. St. Mary's Isle is where the Earl of Selkirk lives. We're going to be able to make it there in a couple hours. So we're going to go there. We're going to kidnap the Earl of Selkirk, and then we're going to trade him for a bunch of American prisoners. And that's going to send a message that we're actually targeting British nobility now. So they get in, they break into the Earl's estate. He's not home, but Lady Selkirk is.
Don't hurt Lady Selkirk.
Now at this point, his crew is like, let's plunder and steal absolutely everything so we can all sell it and get a big payday. And John Paul Jones is like, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to steal one thing. We're going to steal their silver plate, you know, like the silver dining dish for like a tea set. We're going to steal that and only that, and then we're going to leave. Okay.
And then they won't be able to have a decent, noble tea party. And it'll really, really annoy them.
This is perfect. It's the perfect plan. And here's why. Because by stealing the silver plate, it just ruins the entire tea set, which is that a big deal? No, of course not. But to fancy British nobility, it's the end of the world that grown men broke into their house. And there are now ramifications for their government actions. And it's going to...
And now the neighbouring lord is going to be able to host the better tea parties. And we'll be shamed. We'll be shunned.
Spread across the nobility fucking circles like wildfire that, hey, we can get attacked too, and it's going to negatively impact us also. Okay, but here's why it's actually the perfect plan. All right, now, most historians are going to tell you that the crew wanted to plunder everything, and John Paul Jones didn't want to plunder anything, and he resisted, and he fought them, and he ended up brokering this deal where he only let them steal one silver plate, okay?
Because he's a gentleman, courteous. He's got morals.
Okay, I'm going to call bullshit on that. It just doesn't make sense if you've ever talked to another grown adult ever. In my my super duper not expert opinion, John Paul Jones did this because he wanted to bang Lady Selkirk.
What do you mean by that?
And hear me out, because by stealing the one silver plate, he's pulled off the old "I left my hoodie at your house" trick, and now I have an excuse to come back later. And I know this because after they boarded their ship and left, he wrote Lady Selkirk a letter where he sincerely apologized, and it wasn't his idea, and he was gonna buy the plate back from his crew and deliver it to her himself.
I have visions of Lady Selkirk basically being the British Helen of Troy at this point. Was she stunningly beautiful? Was she quite a looker? I don't know. What made John Paul so amorous?
That doesn't prove that he wanted to sleep with her. If anything, it proves my point that he wanted to be a gentleman and do the right thing. Maybe if it wasn't for the fact that he made duplicates of that letter and sent copies of it to his homie back in France, Benjamin Franklin. Okay, that's really significant for two reasons. One, this is a 1700s equivalent of taking screenshots of you spitting game and sending it to your friends. And
Yeah, like, dude, look how this is going. Look at this thirsty Lady Selkirk.
two, he sent it to Benjamin Franklin, the most notorious womanizer out of any other founding father ever.
You know, I invented electricity. I'm sensing a little electricity right here.
Didn't Ben Franklin have syphilis?
Oh.
Yes. But I don't.
Okay, this is probably shocking to a lot of you, okay? Because you
Killer.
think of Ben Franklin and you think of the pictures of the old guy with the balding mullet that's kind of chubby, and you're like, oh, he invented a lot of shit and he's a founding father. Yeah, that's all true. But this dude's entire life, he was slinging dick like it was a going out of business sale. Benjamin Franklin literally invented the odometer, okay? They didn't have cars back then. What the fuck you tracking mileage for? He didn't do it so he could figure out how many miles he had left on his Prius. He did it so he could keep track of how many miles of pipe he laid. Okay, there
And he wrangled himself some syphilis.
There's hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of letters of correspondence between Benjamin Franklin and women of nobility, where he is doing nothing but spitting straight game the entire time. Okay, in 1745, Benjamin Franklin published a paper called Advice on Young Men in Their Choice of Mistress. Not wife, not female companion, mistress. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire thing for you. You can take the time and read it on your own. You should. It's absolutely hilarious. But to summarize it, it's essentially a PowerPoint of why you should be sleeping with cougars for fun. My favorite line from it is, and I quote, "The sin is less. The debauchering of a virgin may ruin her and make her life unhappy." Okay, translation, if I sleep with her first, I'm going to ruin her for everybody else. Which I cannot stress to you enough is an outrageous thing to say right now, let alone in the 1700s. Don't worry.
So he is possibly one of the few gentlemen with that mentality in that time era to say, oh, why would I want to sleep with a virgin? You know, it's all downhill from there. It's not a good experience for her. Now, I want to treat the cougar ladies. I want to be their daddy.
I've got more receipts for this than I've got time. Horace Walpole, a British writer, once wrote, "He's too much the favorite of the ladies to escape their notice." Okay, John Adams, you know, like the other founding father, John Adams, once wrote, "The life of Dr. Franklin was a scene of continual dissipation." Okay, translation, Benjamin Franklin gets more pussy than an animal shelter. In his own autobiography, Ben Franklin said, and I quote, "I frequent intimacies with low women." Okay, if you're not picking up what I put down, I'm trying to tell you that John Paul Jones didn't just send a letter to his friend, okay? He submitted his homework to get graded by the master.
You have been well trained, my young apprentice. They will be no match for you.
By the
Okay, do you see now? Do you see why it's the perfect plan? He steals one singular silver plate. Now, that's going to spread throughout the aristocratic society. All the women are going to be freaked out that this pirate's going to show up and ruin their tea set. And then he's going to come back, restore the plate, bang Lady Selkirk. Then all the aristocratic men are going to be furious because John Paul Jones, the pirate, is showing up, stealing tea sets, and banging their wives.
Yeah, and he might return them in a very courteous way. So it's like he's a pirate, but just enough of a pirate in the minds of female nobility to be that kind of dangerous sexy. Lee, this is the reason you requested it. It's this bit. It's about the Benjamin Franklin, isn't it? And Lady Selkirk.
It's the ultimate form of psychological warfare.
Madame, I have returned.
So the USS Ranger set sail, they leave the Selkirk estate, and at this point, it's literally only been a day. All of the events that we just covered, Whitehaven and the Selkirk estate, was just April 23rd. It is now April 24th, and John Paul Jones could probably head back to France and be a hero because he's just conducted a major psychological warfare operation. But you know what'd be even funnier? Since there's probably now a bunch of British military vessels in the area, it'd be pretty cool if he strategically transferred one to his possession. He's gonna go steal a British warship and be the first man to ever do it. So he starts making his way back towards Whitehaven, looking for British military vessels. He comes across some fishing ships, gets up close, talks with the people on the fishing ships, and is like, hey, have you seen any British warships around? They give him intel. They haven't seen any over towards Whitehaven, but right across the channel, about 70 miles away, there is a British warship over near Belfast. Perfect. John Paul Jones disguises the USS Ranger as a merchant vessel and then puts on a British uniform. He then proceeds to sail really close to the HMS Drake, pretending to be a British merchant vessel in distress, so the HMS Drake goes out to investigate. The HMS Drake sends over a boarding party to see what's wrong. He politely greets them, lets them get up on the deck, at which point he says, and I quote, "You're my prisoner, sir, and I'm John Paul Jones." They then raise the American flag, which essentially forces the HMS Drake to engage them in open water. Now here's the tricky part. John Paul Jones doesn't just want to sink the HMS Drake, he wants to capture it and tow it back to France. Luckily, he's got Marines and he knows how to use them, so they start dancing around the HMS Drake and he gives the order to his Marines to use their muskets and start picking off every officer and every man above deck. After an hour of combat, John Paul Jones's men have sustained 6 casualties and the British 42, including all of their senior leadership, at which point the HMS Drake is forced to surrender. John Paul Jones is now the first American to capture a British warship. But what good is that if nobody knows about it? So he doubles back, goes back to the fishermen that originally gave him the intel, sails up next to him, gives them a cut of the sail and a bunch of gold, and gives them instructions to go tell the story to everybody that'll listen.
You just make sure people know what happened here today.
He then sails back to France and he is a fucking hero, and it is a massive party. He ends up getting gifted a French officer's sword and hanging out with a bunch of French women with his...
Of course, with Benjamin Franklin, maybe. I can imagine the attitude of the French when he got there to tell them, kind of like that.
his buddy, Benjamin Franklin. The American and British newspapers are talking about how he's the first American to capture a British warship. He launched a raid on Whitehaven. He's the first man to attack Great Britain in over 100 years.
And all Britain embarrassed.
The Selkirk estate and only took a single plate, proving that he was a gentleman, sending the message that he could have done a lot more if he wanted to. In contrast, the British newspapers are freaking out, calling him a barbaric pirate that has the audacity to attack nobility.
But you can't call him a barbaric pirate because all he did was steal the silver plate. And he's probably going to return it. And then maybe Lady Selkirk's going to say like, well, actually, no, he's quite the gentleman. I mean, not that I would know, but it's quite not bad looking on the eyes either.
After the parties and the celebration dies down, the political bullshit sets in. John Paul Jones is like, okay, I've proved myself. Give me a better ship and then give me some more ships to support me. Let me take an entire fleet out and go do this. I'll wreak havoc everywhere. But for some reason, the government just isn't doing anything. They won't give him a fleet. They keep offering him like bullshit tiny ship after bullshit tiny ship. He's writing letters of protest to everybody that'll listen. And in one of these letters, he writes one of the most famous quotes in U.S. naval history. I wish to have no connection with any ship that does not sail fast, for I intend to go in harm's way. Translation, I want to haul ass and beat ass. Give me a fucking ship. After like 6 months, they finally give him a 42-gun ship that he renames the Bomb Richard, which translates to the Poor Richard, which is a play on Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac. In addition to that, they give him 4 other smaller ships and 380 men, and he now has his own little fleet. And on October 17th, 1779, they leave port to distress the enemy even more. For the next month and a half, they just sail up and down the British coast, wreaking havoc. They seize 12 merchant vessels. They make landings in Ireland and Scotland, forcing the British to scramble and panic. Then on September 23rd, 1779, the grand finale, his little fleet comes up on a massive fleet of 40 British cargo ships.
Just a quick note, given the time era, if they're gonna, wherever they choose to land in Scotland, I can imagine they maybe met with support. Very anti-British, anti-English. Sorry, not British. Anti-English locals. No.
The only problem, they're being guarded by 2 British warships, the HMS Serapis, which is a massive 50-gun frigate, and her support ship, the HMS Countess of Scarborough. Okay, here's the problem. The HMS Serapis, absolutely on paper, should beat the Bomb Richard, okay? Despite what John Paul Jones wanted, the Bomb Richard is not a fast military ship. It was a merchant vessel that he converted into a warship. It's big, it's slow, it's clunky, it's old. But you know what? Fuck it, he's got Marines, we're gonna figure it out. So John Paul Jones is gonna take his weakness and turn it into a strength. What's his weakness? He doesn't have a ship that's that great. He doesn't really care about the ship. That's actually a strength. You gotta realize this is vehicle on vehicle combat, okay? If you're having road rage with some dude in a Lambo and you're driving a 1994 clapped out F-150, you think you're gonna let the dude in the Lambo win? No, you have nothing to lose. So John Paul Jones opens up the fight by pulling up right next to the Serapis and lashing the ships together.
You're gonna be like, go on, hit this ship, hit it. Who cares more?
John Paul Jones has just turned this into a close quarters slugfest, and he's got Marines. They're opening up with their muskets, their blunderbusses, they're throwing grenades. It is a shit show. The Serapis is opening up with its cannons, blowing the Bomb Richard to smithereens, at which point it becomes obvious the Bomb Richard is gonna sink. The British officer yells over to John Paul Jones, "Are you ready to surrender?" To which he famously replies, "I have not yet begun to fight." He then orders the entire ship to board the HMS Serapis, and they engage in close quarters combat for 3 hours. John Paul Jones and his crew win, forcing the British to surrender on their own vessel. He then cuts the Bomb Richard loose and lets it sink. And while all that was going on, the other British support ship was being engaged by the other ships in his fleet, and they surrendered too. They then spend the next 10 days evading the British Navy and get their ships into a Dutch harbor. Now, there's a huge problem. When the Bomb Richard went down, it took the American flag with it, and he's not about to fly the British flag on the ship that he just took from the British. So essentially, he has no flag on either of these ships. Okay, to us, this doesn't seem like a big deal. Back then, humongous fucking deal, because if any warship sails into a harbor not flying a recognized flag, they're immediately considered a pirate. And the British have already been saying that John Paul Jones is a pirate, and harboring a pirate is illegal, and it would justify the British going to war with the Dutch if they're harboring a fugitive, which is...
No one wants a pirate at this point in time. They will not entertain John Paul Jones in their harbor, because it's harboring a pirate, isn't it?
Is exactly what John Paul Jones looks like right now. So this is a diplomatic emergency, and the Dutch are in a tough spot. They don't want to go to war with America or England, and those are pretty much the only two possibilities if they weigh in. So they just kind of stall as long as they can. While that's going on, the Americans are scrambling to have a new American flag made, and they just kind of have to go off like a loose description. There's like 13 stripes, red, white, and blue, and there's like a field of stars in blue. And what the seamstress or flag maker comes up with is the Serapis flag. And they're like, fuck it, that's close enough. Fly the colors, diplomatic emergency solved. And from here, everything goes to shit. John Paul Jones is ordered to turn over the Serapis to the French, because technically they're the ones that gave him the Bomb Richard and financed the entire endeavor. So that's their ship now, and he is then sent back to America.
Is that to kind of, you know, compensate for the sinking of the Bomb Richard? Is it Bon Homme? I said the Bomb Richard. Yeah, is that to compensate for the loss?
He gets back to America. He is given a golden medal by Congress, which is the equivalent to a Medal of Honor back in this point in time, similar to the one that Daniel Morgan was given, because the Medal of Honor didn't exist yet. He is then pretty much stuck behind a desk on administrative duty, because the United States Continental Congress doesn't think that they actually need to have a strong naval presence once the war is over, and the war is winding down, and it's looking like America's gonna win. John Paul Jones continues to advocate and is very adamant that America should have a massive, strong, powerful navy, but nobody wants to listen to him. everyone. The American Revolutionary War comes to an end and the Continental Navy is essentially disbanded because America has no interest in having a navy other than defending its own shores, and now John Paul Jones has nothing to do. Then in 1787, Catherine the Great of Russia comes knocking because she's fighting the Russo-Turkish War and she needs experienced sailors to go help her win this war, and John Paul Jones gets the offer and he takes it. With the permission of Congress, he goes over, he fights for Russia, fucks up the Ottoman Empire, and politics strikes again. They don't want some foreigner getting all the credit for these massive successful naval engagements, so they end up giving the credit to some other dude that's politically connected.
Fuck me, right?
On top of that, guess which other country Catherine the Great is recruiting naval officers from? The British.
UK.
Guess who hates John Paul Jones?
The UK.
British. Because of that, they then frame him and claim
English.
that he assaulted a 12-year-old girl, which did not happen. Almost every historian agrees on that. But the scandal was so big and so large that Catherine the Great determined that it just wasn't the political impact of taking Jones's side, so she cuts him loose. John Paul Jones then retires to Paris, France in 1790 because he knows the most people there and he had the most fun there with Benjamin Franklin. He's writing back to the United States, offering his services, offering to help them found a United States Navy and build up the Navy that America should have, and nobody.
Does he really want to be in France at this point in history? As a aristocrat?
He wants to listen. And then 2 years later in 1792, John Paul Jones would pass away from kidney disease and is buried in what amounts to an unmarked grave in obscurity in France, where he remained for over a century. It wasn't until 1899 that America's French diplomat, another war hero that had earned the Medal of Honor, Horace Porter, spent 6 years trying to track down his remains, and he finally did it in 1905. Then, under Teddy Roosevelt, his remains were exhumed and transported back to America, with an inscription that reads, John Paul Jones, 1747 to 1792, U.S. Navy, 1775 to 1783. He gave our Navy its earliest traditions of heroism and victory.
Oh,
and that is the story of John Paul Jones, the father of America's Navy. He is credited with capturing or sinking at least 46 enemy ships, killing over 3,000 enemy combatants, and taking over 2,000 prisoners. He was the first man to raise the American flag over the United States Navy's first warship. He was there when the Marine Corps made their first amphibious landing. He is the first man to invade Great Britain in over 100 years, and he is the first American to capture a British warship. And yeah, he actually got that silver plate back to Lady Selkirk. I like to think he got lucky. She later described him as noble. So in conclusion, that's John Paul Jones, and it's a name you should remember. Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out. Just when I think I hate politicians enough, they prove me wrong.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was going to be my question at the end of that video there. Yeah, but did that silver plate actually ever get back to Lady Selkirk? She described him as noble, did she? Did she? Well, she sounds a bit smitten with him, doesn't she? Right. Isn't it the biggest shame that his reputation and how he's remembered now, he wasn't aware of that in his lifetime. So he was never aware that he would have been referred to as the father of America's Navy. And that's the saddest thing about this story, I think. Like, it would have been nice to have heard that, you know, this title, being the father of the US Navy, that he was aware of it before he passed away. And I thought they were going to say something happened with the French Civil War, or not the French Civil War, the French Revolution. But yes, it's very, very sad that he didn't know that before he died. What a very noble man. And again, this is the saddest thing, actually, that he could never progress further in his career because of the family that he was born into. It's disgusting, isn't it? It's horrible, horrible. And to think he's more competent and capable than most of the aristocracy or the nobles that are in similar roles as him, but because of his birth station, or whatever you want to refer to it as, could never gain promotion. He could never go any further. It's awful, really, isn't it, guys? Anyway, Lee, was that the reason that you you requested this video? Is that little story thrown in there with Lady Selkirk? I do love that was thrown into the story, and there's actually like evidence, historical evidence to back that up. Noble. Thank you so much for requesting this video. It's very, very interesting and comical. Do you know what I mean? Nick is such a good storyteller. He takes a story, the way he tells it, with the respect that it deserves as well, but he throws in humour, and they're just so enjoyable to watch, aren't they? I love his videos. So thank you for requesting this, Lee. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed watching along with me. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies, and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye.